Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Whatcha Readin', where I tell you what I've been reading. People ask me all the time, Chuck, when you're not writing, what are you reading? And these are the current selections that I have been perusing. Rendezvous South Atlantic by Douglas Readin. This is a nautical World War II set war novel by Douglas Readin, who wrote, I believe, 68 novels in his career. Largely, entirely dealing with historical settings, military action kind of stories. But very prolific author. Also wrote under the name Alexander Kent for his terrific Napoleon era nautical adventures featuring Belletho. He takes them from midshipman to admiral over the course of 20 some books, and they're each one of them excellent. This is where war action fiction in many cases in many of these books rises to literature, in my opinion. Just a terrific writer. He was Readin was a World War II Royal Navy vet, knew what he was talking about, saw action in the North Atlantic and other places, and writes with a real authority. And this book concerns a British merchant ship that's armed up and basically converted to sort of a dollar store warship, because the British were in such dire straits in the opening years of World War II before the United States entered the war to help. They were real in danger of being invaded, their population being starved by the U-boats, sinking all manner of ships, importing goods to England that they needed, food, medicine, everything else. I mean, England is an island, or the UK is an island, and they were being cut off from the world. And Readin deals a lot with this in his World War II novels about the convoys and the U-boat wars and everything else. And so basically, many early in the war, a lot of British warships, Ark Royal and the Prince Charles, Prince of Wales, and ships like that, these major players in the British Navy were sunk either by U-boats or battleships in the case of the Bismarck and the Tirpitz. And in the Pacific, the Japanese sank a number of major British battleships. So Britain was going through a period where they were being starved of ships, and they couldn't build them fast enough to keep up with what was going on. So they were taking these merchant ships and basically arming them up and having them patrol the seas. And of course, they're merchant ships. They're not warships, so they're extremely vulnerable. And this was dangerous duty taken on by both members of the Royal Navy and members of the British Merchant Marines, civilian employees. So desperate times, and Readin always presents it well. I really didn't understand how bad things were in the UK in the early days of the war until I began reading Readin, and then I read further on it. I mean, how the Blitz was really, really bad, and rationing. The residents of the UK, basically down to subsistence calorie levels, things like that. There were no luxuries at all. Everything was rationed: gasoline, electricity, everything, and it was really bad times, which Britain really didn't recover from until the early 60s. There was still rationing in the UK into the 50s. That's how deprived they were of the basic needs of life. And Readin presents it well, and his stories are always he brings you on board that ship and makes you conversant very quickly with all the terms the characters use. His dialogue is excellent. His characters are generally the lead character is suffering from some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder from something horrible that he's experienced beforehand, and he's new to the crew. I mean, this is kind of a bit of a formula for Readin, but it always works because we are introduced to the ship through the eyes of its new captain, and there's the usual tensions and jealousies and rivalries and everything on board. But it's just a terrific read. Like Riemann always is a terrific read. I suggest you get any of his. He's written both from the British and the German perspective in his novels, and they are uniformly engaging, engrossing page turners. Okay, I read a book earlier, reviewed here, Fat Gladiators and something else by Garrett Ryan, and this is a second volume, and it's Insane Emperors, Sunken Cities, and Earthquake Machines, and it's Ryan basically answers the frequently asked questions about the ancient world, primarily ancient Rome, and I really, really enjoyed the first book, and this one is just as good. It answers a whole bunch of questions I've always wanted to have answered. And, if you're just a casual reader or you like popular histories, this is a great book to, dip into and just sort of, jump around in because he's a very good writer. In some cases, very witty, always brings you right into the subject. And he knows his subject. He's ancient Greek and Roman scholar, PhD, so he knows what he's talking about. But he doesn't write in that stiff, formalized fashion that so many writers write in. It's a more conversational tone. It's like he's telling you a story at a dinner table, and he does answer some terrific questions. One of them, he talks about the Roman aqueduct system. The aqueducts were basically, they brought water to Rome and various other Roman settlements. And they would carry water from mountain springs, not lakes, as most people popularly believe, but mountain springs. Romans didn't want to drink lake water. And you would carry millions and millions and millions of gallons a day to places like Pompeii and Ostia and Rome and other settlements, Constantinople. And sometimes these aqueducts, they would be raised like this structure, which basically just creates a gradient for the water to roll down toward the intended reservoir that they want to reach. And the water just rolls down a channel at the very top of what looks like a bridge here. And, or they went through tunnels. Some of these tunnels were, a mile long, drilled through rock and then onto lead piping. And as Ryan explains, yes, they did use a lot of lead piping, but they most likely were not, it didn't create a health burden for Rome using lead piping, because the Romans were aware. A lot of times we don't believe, a lot of people believe they weren't aware, that's popular opinion, of the dangers of lead. Because people say, well, they drank from lead vessels. Lead vessels are pipes, not cups. They didn't have mugs made of lead. They knew better. They knew lead was poison. But they reasoned that the water was rushing over through the lead piping at such a rate that it wouldn't pick up much lead contamination. And then over time, the interior of the pipes became coated with mineral deposits, shielding the water from the lead entirely. So it was a safe watering system. The mineral deposits, and some of these pipes, I call them pipes, they're really conduits, large enough for a man to stand in. I mean, these were major, major engineering projects, the most expensive engineering projects of the Roman Empire. Costing what would be in our today's money, billions and billions of dollars to construct. But you could get, I don't want to get too deep in this, but you could get, your own water service if you were wealthy enough, and you had to be wealthy, and you were given a brass connector to the main pipe, and it would have your name stamped on it. And depending on how much you were willing to pay, they would make the hole in the nozzle bigger or smaller. So you paid less for a small nozzle, more for a large nozzle. And some crafty consumers were caught boring out a wider nozzle to get more water illegally, more water than they had paid for. And they were put to death. Because Romans took their water seriously. But just amazing, amazing stuff. A 2 million cubic liter reservoir inside of Rome that fed the baths and fountains and the rest. And the fountain at Trevi, the famous fountain of Trevi in Rome, is still fed today by an aqueduct built by the ancient Romans. That's pretty frickin' amazing. Equally amazing is Roman roads. He goes into how they were constructed, how, road construction today is largely based on what the Romans did. They built thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of road all throughout the Roman Empire, all built by Roman legionaries and military engineers, because the roads were built so that Rome could move its legions swiftly throughout the empire to put down revolts and rebellions and what have you. And many of these roads are, still in existence. You can still walk them. And also many of these roads form the gradients for, modern day roadways. When I visited Austria many years ago, our bus driver informed us as we rode along this curving road through the Alps that this was once a Roman road, that this gradient was carved out of the mountainside by Roman legionaries or legionnaires. Is it legionaries or legionnaires? That's his question for his next book. Okay. He also gets to Caligula, everyone's favorite crazy emperor, mad, bad, and dangerous to know, as he was described. And he explodes some of the myths about Caligula. Caligula was perhaps maybe not crazy, but certainly power mad. We know for a fact that he had lots of people put to death. He engaged the Romans in a spending spree of crazy, insane construction projects. He built 2 enormous barges, and they were raised they were later raised after many failed attempts to raise them. And it was discovered that they had heated marble floors, his barges, hot and cold running water, and a whole bunch of other amenities. And they were just these enormous boats that he would float around a lake on, lording it over everybody. A lot of people put to death. Some of the most famous stories about him, Garrett Ryan believes aren't true. And they've been proven demonstrably false. He did not marry his sister and then sacrifice her. He did not promote a horse, his favorite racehorse, to the Senate. He mentioned it in passing one time, and it was kind of, everybody took it as a joke. But he did, dress up. He did cross-dress. He did dress up as, various gods. He did humiliate and embarrass aristocrats. One thing I can say for Caligula, he never tormented the lower classes. He always tormented the aristocrats, Roman noblemen and senators and people like that are the ones that he would have put to death or kill himself. But when I say lower classes, that does not include slaves. We know that Caligula on several occasions beat slaves to death with chains. He also, when there was a shortage of meat in the city, fed prisoners to bears and lions, and not in the Colosseum, just fed them, just threw them into the pits with the lions and bears, things like that. Not a nice guy, but not necessarily crazy, maybe just completely power mad. Now, some of the loopier, goofier stories that we hear about Caligula, Garrett Ryan says is probably due to the fact that the earliest known records of Caligula's reign were recorded by Seneca, who had been banished by Caligula and had no reason to love him, and so he wrote only the most scandalous things, and a lot of times took rumor as fact, as we still see that in journalism today, right? And then Suetonius wrote about Caligula much later and gave credence to a lot of the rumors without any real proof. And then later on, the most damning of all, much later on, Dio wrote about Caligula and just believed everything he heard, and possibly even made some of the stuff up to make Caligula seem even crazier than he was. But facts point to the fact that he was just a mean, vindictive son of a bitch with a huge ego. Another fascinating thing, this is a question I really wanted answered, was how many books were lost in the fire that burnt the library at Alexandria? Now, apparently this was a fire that was set by Julius Caesar. He wanted a ship burned, and the fire spread along the port of Alexandria and eventually burnt down the library. And it turns out that the library at Alexandria, it had a history of bad luck. The initial fire wasn't the end of it. There were other fires, there were sackings, there was even a tsunami that flooded it. So the books, the many, many books, possibly as many as 1 million books in the Library of Alexandria, and by books I mean scrolls, were destroyed. Any that survived the fire would have been destroyed in all the subsequent events. And, true to form, barbarians love to burn books and destroy libraries. So all of the great libraries across Rome, the Roman Empire, all the way to the latter days of the Byzantine Empire, were destroyed by barbarians, intentionally burned, or torn up, or whatever. And a remarkable number of works. Now Garrett Ryan puts forward that a lot of this stuff would have been unreadable or of little interest to us. Long-winded histories and subpar Greek dramas. But I think we should have been allowed to pick and choose. And many of these works only survived because they were copied by scribes at the time and taken who took their own copies from the library. You weren't allowed to remove books from the Library of Alexandria, but you could sit there and copy them. And so that's the reason why a lot of the books there. But we lost maybe 70 to 80% of ancient writings with the destruction of these libraries. And I was interested to learn that my favorite Roman writer, Tacitus, his works only survived because they discovered one copy of his works, his histories, in a monastery. So literally, we almost never got to read Tacitus. If that one copy had been destroyed, we wouldn't even know his name today. So anyway, cool book. If you have any interest, even a casual interest in the Roman Empire, these books are fascinating and a lot of fun to read. And you'll find a lot of surprising facts and anecdotes that you can share with others so you can pretend that you're classically educated like I do. Okay, that's it for this week. I'll let you know more about what I've been reading when I'm done reading it. Okay? Thanks for listening.